Okay, so we left off, we're speaking about the autonomic nervous system, and we kind of laid the groundwork in terms of the anatomy of the whole thing last time. We talked about the anatomy of the sympathetic system and then the anatomy of the parasympathetic system. And we left off establishing the fact that we've got this mixed composition of these autonomic nerves that allow for this bidirectional signal, right? Signals coming into the CNS and then response signals coming out to the efferent tissues, the effector tissues. And so I asked you all to look at this checkpoint question, and we'll kind of go through this here and then we'll take it from there. So the first question is, which autonomic division regulates the release of epinephrine from the adrenal medulla? And I don't know if anyone wants to share a response. I'll be looking in the chat. But I'll give you all a minute to kind of think about this. And if no one wants to share a response, we'll kind of go through the answer. But I want you to think about this. I'll give you a minute. And which autonomic division regulates the release of epinephrine from the adrenal medulla? Really simple question. Okay, it seems like everyone is a bit shy. So I'll go ahead and share, but it's really important that you engage. So please don't be shy to share responses. You can type them in the chat and I'll read them aloud. So the autonomic division that we said regulates the release of epinephrine from the adrenal medulla was the sympathetic division, okay? And we said that this was one of the 3 routes of communication for the sympathetic nervous system. We talked about 3 different routes, right? We talked about the synapse of those preganglionic neurons onto the sympathetic chain, and then a second neuron, a postganglionic neuron, synapsing out onto the various effector tissues, glands, and so on. And the second route was a similar synapse, but to a ganglia that was not a part of the sympathetic chain. We describe this as being a collateral ganglia. And so the third route of communication here, specifically for the sympathetic nervous system, was using the adrenal medulla. So that's the inner part of the adrenal gland where we've got these chromaffin cells, and they were acting like those postganglionic neurons, and they then release their hormones, okay? The second part of the question, which part of the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic or parasympathetic, produces the more diffuse response, and then why? And this kind of feeds into that first answer, right? So the more diffuse response, oh, got someone here. Yeah, so that fight, flight, or freeze, that's exactly correct. So the fight, flight, or freeze is what gives us the more diffuse response, and that is adjoined with the sympathetic division of the nervous system. And we described it being a more diffuse response because of this adrenal medulla involvement. Because we synapsed onto this adrenal medulla, and then the chromaffin cells released a hormone. That hormone floods the entire vascular system because it's now in the blood, as opposed to a synaptic communication where we've got a neurotransmitter. So we said the adrenal medulla produced that drastic diffuse response because it produced norepinephrine as a hormone, which was able to flood the entire system using the blood. That's the difference between a neurotransmitter and a hormone. A hormone's in the blood, and a neurotransmitter is only at a synapse, okay?